I'm Heather. I'm back with another book review, but instead of my normal single book review, just doing one book, I have a collection of books that I read simply because people on the internet told me to. I feel like this is a very good way to live my life now. Like, I should just incorporate it into all parts of my life, like only wearing things that people on the internet tell me to, or only eating things that people on the internet tell me to. The internet, I feel, is very wise in this way, collectively. But anyway, I recently started my booktube channel about like a month and a half to 2 months ago-ish. And last month I did the booktubeathon, or reading rush readathon thing for the first time. And not only was I reading a crap ton in that time, like you should do during the readathon, I was also obsessively watching other people read a crap ton through their vlogs and stuff. And I just like obsessively wrote down a huge list of all the ones that people said were absolutely amazing. So then I went to the bookstore with my huge list and only came away with 4 books, which is A, all I can afford, and B, all I can actually fit into my house. Like, my husband and I both have like a really deep, intense love of reading, so our like book collections are just constantly fighting with each other for space. Mine is losing at the minute because I recently Marie Kondoed the crap out of my shelf, but with the kind of book buying habits I've had recently, it's going to quickly catch up. Anyway, the 4 books that I bought and then read, and I'll tell you how they were, are My Year of Rest and Relaxation by obsessively, I think that's how you say that. God knows. I can't really remember where on BookTube I found this particular one, but I think vaguely it was Siani Reads, and also someone that she sometimes has chats with on her videos named Bert. I think that they were the ones that were on about this, but I'm not certain. I'm pretty sure. The next one is Cove by Conan Jones. This one actually I got off Shawn, the book maniac, and it was really weird to see this one come up because I think he lives in Japan and he's very much not Welsh, I think. So to see such a Welsh name and a Welsh author sort of come up in a really not Welsh place at all was really weird. The next one is Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. I cannot for my life remember where on BookTube I found this one, but I do think it was 2 different places. Like, I saw it, someone saying it was amazing, and then another place, someone else saying it was amazing. The last one, the 4th one, I don't actually have the physical book because I listened to it on Audible. It's the Flatshare by Beth O'Leary? Okay, so I'll start with My Year of Rest and Relaxation by obsessively, and I'll start with this one because I think it's the one I liked least of all of them. I think actually, even though I didn't dislike it, it's the only one that I didn't absolutely love. Basically, sort of the premise is she's doing what she calls self-preservational hibernation. She's just drugging herself to crap. Like, she's found this psychologist or this like psychiatrist, counselor, whatever, who is like the worst counselor on the planet, and she just keeps giving her drugs. She just prescribes her anything on the planet and doesn't really care how it affects her or what happens to her. She's clearly just really eccentric and weird, and that's exactly how this narrator likes it. She just keeps going back to that person to get more and new and stronger and weirder drugs. Just lies to her, and the therapist must know that she's lying to her and still gives her the drugs. And basically she starts going into these like blackouts where she's so drugged up and she's been sleeping so long that she just does things in a blackout. She sort of wakes up from her nap or whatever, like her like drugged sleeping state, and just finds different things in her life. Like, she found like a whole table full of like really old Chinese food, or she'll like go to the bodega down the street to like get some food or whatever and find out that she's already been there that day and she got like 7 ice creams. She's trying to just like phase out all of the emotions in her life and not feel them anymore. So she's just given up on life, basically. She doesn't do laundry, she just wears underpants and then throws them away. She does go to work, but does eventually get fired from her job for having naps in the cupboard. But she just like works at this weird like art gallery or something anyway, even though she doesn't need to due to like inheritance or something anyway. So she loses that job and then she just doesn't even look for a new one. She just like does more drugs and does more sleeping and doesn't need to go to work anymore. over the course of the book, it becomes clearer the kinds of feelings that she's trying to not think about. She's an orphan, sort of newly. She didn't really have amazing relationships with her parents, but they're both dead. She's sort of holding on to her house, their house, her childhood house, sort of out of sentimentality. She can't bring herself to get rid of it. She only really has one friend, but doesn't like her very much and isn't very nice to her. She only really sort of had a boyfriend-ish who was really actually a shit. Was basically emotionally abusive and really horrible, and she was sort of trapped into that. And it just got to a point really where she just decided to turn off. Like, she didn't want to feel anymore, and she went into this basically self-preservational hibernation. Some stuff that I liked about it was, I think the writing style is pretty good. Like, for me, the writing style and how good the writing is really the most important part of a book. Like, the plot and the characters and everything can be the best plot and characters I've ever heard of, but if the writing is bad, I can't cope. Also, sort of the obverse of that, like, if a plot and character is really horrible but the writing is super good, like, I'm still team book. Also, I like that it does have genuinely funny moments in it, and like genuinely clever moments. Like, she does a lot of talking about being obsessed with Whoopi Goldberg, and I can weirdly relate. So things that I think I didn't like sort of made it the least like one of, or the one that I least liked of all of them. First of all, it's really gross. Like, the author has like a weird obsession with like saying really gross stuff. Like, I know it's supposed to be like part of like the realistic environment of it, and like saying realistic things, and being, in New York City, and living a real life and being down to earth, and like a shock factor and everything. But like, I don't want to hear for ages about like cum and fluids and like her pooing on things at work, and like everything is about vaginas. Like, obviously vaginas are pretty cool, okay, but I don't want to like talk about various like kinds of moistness and stuff like that. Like, I'm not down. Also, the most sort of annoying thing I think is that the wrap up at the end just sort of ends sort of like a Deus Ex Machina thing, except for that the Deus is a nap. It's just like a super extreme nap where she's just like set someone in front of her door to make sure she doesn't jump out a window or whatever, and then she just like naps for months, and then suddenly she's better. And like, maybe it's because I'm like not depressed and never have been or whatever, like, knock on wood, knock on some fucking wood. Like, maybe I just don't get it, but I'm a little bit annoyed that they spent all that time sort of building up all of these complex feelings that she's trying to escape, and then she just has a shit ton of napping, and then now she's fine. Like, whatever. I'm still processing this one, I think, but in the end, I think I didn't really like it. Maybe because I didn't understand it. God knows. The next one is Cove by Conan Jones, and I loved this one. I absolutely loved it. I really like to read things that are by Welsh authors about Welsh places as well, because I live in Wales, and I can sort of really get into the scene of things, because I've been to a lot of like the sort of rural Welsh beachy farmy areas that these authors write about. I can really set myself in it. Basically, the sort of premise of this one is a guy hops in a boat just for sort of the day, packs himself a lunch, gets some fishing gear and everything, in order to go out into the sort of open water and dump his dad's ashes. So his dad has obviously recently died. He wants to be alone with his dad, fishing one last time, and then spread his dad's ashes. But his boat or whatever gets struck by lightning. He's in like a massive wreck. He overturns. He's really injured when he wakes up, and now he's stranded at sea. And he's sort of, it sort of has this feeling of like, what's that movie where that guy gets stuck in a rock, like 28 hours or 24 hours or something like that, that guy in Boulder, Colorado, where he like fell into a crevice or whatever and got stuck, and then had to like cut his own arm off to get away. But like, it's sort of like that, in that it's a sort of minute by minute, play by play of his thoughts about survival, and about his situation, and about his life that he's missing, or that he will miss if he doesn't end up at home. He has sort of a vague reckoning of a woman that he's left behind, and you also get sort of like just a vague sort of description of the life he's left behind. No one ever tells you explicitly that he has a pregnant wife at home waiting, but it's just alluded to. The book sort of opens up with her sort of standing on the shore getting quite obviously bad news from like a search team type guy. The beauty of the story and like what makes the story so amazing isn't so much the plot and everything, which, you know, is good and gripping, but it's just the words that are used. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's set up in like a really poetic sort of way. Like some of the pages, you know, it's set up in like blocks of text, blocks of thought. It sort of jumps around quite a lot between his thoughts that he has, like his memories, but also like his tactical thinking for now, like what do I need to do to survive this. He also spends a bit of time potentially hallucinating. No one ever says explicitly that he is hallucinating, but he's obviously dehydrated and injured, and a lot of the things that he's seeing and thinking are a bit implausible. But also he spends quite a bit of time thinking about how it wouldn't be so bad to die. The only sort of really horrible thing about him dying would be who and what he leaves behind. Like, I love this kind of writing where it doesn't use more words than it needs to. It uses exactly the right word at the right time so that it only needs to use one word. Sort of gorgeous bit of writing, really. And I really, like, I loved the ending. I loved how he described things. Like, a lot of the reviews that I saw online are people read it and then just immediately read it again because they felt like they didn't get all of it, first of all, and I love a book like that. So the next one is Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. This is the one that I most recently finished. I actually finished this one today at lunch, and I was crying at Cafe Nero trying to eat my sandwich and just like have my lunch in peace reading this book. Like, whenever I read a book, I sort of tend to keep like a bit of notes to the side, like a bit of a sort of reading journal, if you will, like really like a rough version of one. And like I've said like, oh, page 20, I'm already crying. Page 36, crying again. Page 96, crying again in Nero. And when I bought the book at Waterstones, when I went in and I like handed it to the guy to pay for it, he gave me a look like I was about to go through some shit. And then he told me it's the best book he read last year. Like, I think everyone who reads this book, they fall in love with it and also just spend all of that time weeping. The synopsis of it is, it's a dad and his two sons, like immediately following the death of his wife over just like a sudden accident. So she wasn't ill, they weren't able to sort of cope with it over time. She just was there and then she wasn't. Sort of the narration swings between the dad, the boys, and also a crow that comes to live in their house and like help them grieve, which sounds like a crazy idea. And at first it's like, but he's a crow, but he can talk. I don't understand. It's like a real crow. I don't know. But as the sort of story goes on, it becomes more and more plausible. Like, yeah, okay, there's a crow. He's big. He's living in the house. He talks. He's a bit of a shit. You know, he's like cheeky. He like takes a piss out of everybody. Does a bit of babysitting. You know, does a bit of playing around. Talks a lot of real talk. You know, and basically is just there for the family while they're coping. And he says like, I'll be here for you until you don't need me anymore. I mean, they're originally like, go away, we don't need you. But he's like, no, I'll be here for you until you don't need me anymore. How the dad and the boys speak. They speak, you know, relatively normally. Like, they speak really beautifully and poetically, obviously, because it's that kind of book. But the crow speaks really sort of muddled and garbled and cryptic, mysterious sort of stream of consciousness type writing. And so I'd sort of be reading the dad and the brothers for a while and then come to a crow part and then suddenly need to slow all the way down in my reading and think really hard about what the crow is saying, because everything he says has about 8,000 meanings, it feels like, that you can just sort of think about it for ages. I just love like the crow as a character. Like, it's apparently based off of Ted Hughes' Crow. So like a work or like a poem or work, like a book of poetry or whatever by Ted Hughes called Crow. And I don't really like poetry. Like, I like poetic prose, but poetry in general I'm not really into. So I don't really know anything about Ted Hughes. I hadn't really read anything of his before. But it's definitely something I had to sort of Google because it's obviously sort of based quite a lot on that. Like, the dad is doing like a book. He's writing a book about Ted Hughes, and he's obviously like really loves him and he spends a lot of time like being obsessed with him. So it was a sort of big part of the book. I had to sort of Google a bit about it. But that's something that I also love about books like this. Like, there's a million super clever references to other things I don't know anything about, and then I need to go and Google them. Things that, you know, I would like to know more about, and I didn't even know that I wanted to know more about them. So, like, I've written, like, loads of things that I had to Google. Like, you know, I had to Google Ted Hughes. I had to Google Ibn Arabi. Do you know that guy? An Arab Andalusian Muslim scholar, mystic, poet, and philosopher whose works have grown to be very influential beyond the Muslim world. Another thing, Shostakovich, he's obviously a musician, but I had to Google all of his works. I had to listen to it for a little bit to sort of understand why it was going to be like this soothing, helpful thing in the grieving process. I had to Google Osip Emilyevich Mandelstam, who was a Jewish Russian poet and essayist. He was the husband of Nadezhda Mandelstam and one of the foremost members of the Akhmist school of poets. He was arrested by Joseph Stalin's government during the repression of the 1930s and sent into internal exile with his wife Nadezhda. So there's like a million things like that, like really clever references, because obviously like the dad's quite learned. He's like a professor and like an author or whatever. So there's a lot of references to things that I didn't get, and I loved Googling them. So the main things I liked about it were just how gorgeously it's written, and also how well the author captures like a feeling and a process of grief and love. How it's described, it's like a really deep, insightful feeling. Obviously, he's presenting it amazingly. It's even hard to describe. And like the writing style and the sort of feeling of the book comes across as like relaxed, familiar, like understanding, forgiving, like ironic, sarcastic. Sort of the crow and the dad and the boys like taking the piss out of each other all the time. Sort of just like a feeling of it's okay, you know, everything you're going through, everything you're feeling, it's okay. It's okay to laugh, it's okay to cry, you know, you're forgiven, you're okay. And there's so many just absolutely gorgeous parts of it, like where he's like, the dad, he's saying, this is like his narrative, he's like, she had flu. It was unusual for her to be ill. The boys were tiny and it had snowed and she couldn't bear us rampaging about the house, so we got dressed and went sledging in the park. We were pathetic without her. The boys didn't know where their hats were, couldn't get their joined mittens through their puffer jackets, didn't want to see other boys, bigger boys, sledging on the hill. It was hopeless. I took them out without Willie, so before we'd even got down the road, their little toes were aching. They both whinged, and we all felt, the three of us, that without her, things didn't work as they should. They pitied me. I felt acutely embarrassed that my brilliance as a father had been exposed as wholly reliant upon her. Perhaps if I'd known it was a dress rehearsal for the rest of our lives, I would have said, buck up, you little turds, or help me, or take me instead, please. And then, like, this part that I was reading in Nero, when I absolutely freaking lost myself, where she's like, we used to think we would both die at the same age she had. We used to think she could see us through mirrors. We used to think she was an undercover agent sending Dad money, asking for updates. We were careful to age her, never trap her, careful to name her Granny when Dad became Grandpa. We hope she likes us. Oh my god, guys, I'm gonna do it again. Anyway. Okay, so the last one, the Flatshare, was also really amazing, but for an absolutely completely different reason altogether. Like, the two novellas that I read are really deep and really poetic, you know, and like made you feel really strong things. The Flatshare doesn't make anyone feel any strong feelings at all, really. It's just amazingly fun. Like, everything about it is like a breath of fresh air. It went really fast. I listened to it on the audiobook and I did it in about a single day. It was amazing. Like, at the end, I sort of like squealed with glee. Like, it's the perfect little ending for the perfect little book. Just 100% a joy. So basically, the synopsis is that this girl, she's dating this like shit of a guy, and he just finally dumps her and she's like, I need to move on, but I can't afford my own apartment. So she takes up this ad with a guy who's a palliative care nurse and does night shifts. So he's not there at all, like, during the night. He's only there in the time that normal people are at work. So he's like, okay, I'll do an ad where I share my flat with someone who has normal working hours. I'll be at work while they're at the apartment, sort of like getting ready, having dinner, sleeping, blah, blah. And then when they go to work, that's when I'll come home and I'll do the same thing. So The girl Tiffy and the guy Leon, they sort of live this way for months and months and never actually see each other. They only sort of leave each other little notes, and they're like really cute little notes. You know, they're obviously becoming friends and getting to know each other really well and everything just through these notes that they leave around. And like loads of really cute things sort of go off on the sides, you know, like side plots where Leon's trying to find the lover of this man who's a patient at his hospital. So he's dying, and he used to be in love with this guy during World War II or whatever, but he's gone now. They split up somehow. So Leon's like on a mission to find this guy. He goes looking for a million different Johnny Whites in search of this like guy before the patient dies. There's also like side plots to do with Tiffy's work. She's like an editor for a crocheting thing, like a crafting book company or whatever. She does like really weird books, design books, and like, you know, knitting books and stuff like that. Also, Leon's brother is in prison, and at the time, like when the book first starts, Leon has a girlfriend named Kay, and Kay sort of allows the girl to live in the apartment because she finds that Tiffy's unattractive, and like obviously Leon would not want to sleep with her because she's so unattractive. But then sort of as time goes on, you find that Kay and Leon aren't really meant for each other in the way of all books like this. Like, first of all, Kay thinks that Leon's brother is guilty, when sort of one of the main sort of things about Leon's brother being in prison is that he's there as an innocent man. He was like wrongly convicted of this thing, and they're trying to get him out, but all of his lawyers and everything are really crap. Anyway, the Tiffy and Leon, they're like living in the same flat, never meeting each other, until sort of an accidental oversleeping by Tiffy, and then they have like a really cute like run-in in the shower scene where they accidentally see each other naked, and it's really funny and it's really cute, and it sort of launches them into, okay, like I guess we can actually talk and like be friends in real life instead of just being people that leave notes for each other. There's quite a lot to do with like emotional abuse. Like Tiffy's boyfriend, or like the ex-boyfriend or whatever, is really shitty and like keeps her in like this emotional and mental grip, and it really affects her and keeps her from moving on and like being with Leon properly because she's so emotionally like damaged because of being with this guy. Anyway, I imagine you can sort of guess like how it ends. Like, I'm not going to tell you with all of the specifics, but it's really happy ending. I really liked it. Like, I think one of the good things about it is the writing. Like, I'll say it again, it doesn't matter what the book is, as long as the writing is really good, I'm in. And I think like this book is quite cheesy, like the plot and the characters are really cheesy, but because the writing is really good, it's really good. I think one of the things that I didn't like is that the baddies are kind of 2D. Do you know what I mean? Like the villain characters or whatever are sort of like over vilified. Like they don't really act like normal people. They only act like bad people, you know. They're not really well developed, but I mean it's a bit of a choosy, fun, like carefree sort of book, so it doesn't really matter. But it's just sort of like sort of near in the end, one of the baddies was like being really, really intensely a baddie, and I just thought, oh well, that's sort of like overdoing it just a little bit, but like who cares? Right, okay, that's the 4 books that I read. Didn't really like that one, but the other 3 I absolutely loved. So this is 100% a success. So I'm probably just gonna get like all of my book recommendations off of BookTube now, I think. Right, okay, I definitely have to go. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. If you've read any of these books, or you read similar books, or you have other suggestions to give me, because now I'm going to listen to all of the recommendations that I got off the internet, definitely leave them in the comments below. I'm 100% in. Anyway, thank you, bye!